Are you going to meet Jesus on the way? Or are you simply waiting for him to come to you? We get complacent with our blessings because we've seen that before. We've seen our bills covered. We've seen somebody, get better. We say we want to bring people to Christ, but we don't want the crisis. He waited so that it just wasn't one man that he was saving, but many. So I'm totally excited for today. I am thankful that you guys have showed up. This is our 25th week of Women of Valor, and I just feel like we've come so far in our studies. Every single one of them is unique. And so today we are studying Mary and Martha of Bethany. We've touched on them a little bit in our previous weeks, but this is a story of two sisters from Bethany that is widely known because so much of it is captured in this one chapter of John 11. So you've got the shortest verse in the Bible is tied to Jesus being emotional, right? And people know this one, Jesus wept. And so now in this story, you know why Jesus wept, right? He had performed so many other miracles, but here Jesus was emotional with it.
John 11 what?
We're gonna John chapter 11, we're gonna read verses 1 through 44. So in this chapter, we see a huge measure of faith from an entire family and a resurrection and many people that are essentially coming to faith and saved through this story. So let's go into John chapter 11, beginning at verse 1, and we'll read through verse 44. Give me a minute to get there. It says, now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. And then after this, he said to the disciples, let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you, and are you going there again? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. These things he said, after that he said to them, our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him up. Then the disciples said, Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get well. However, Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought that he was speaking about taking rest in sleep. Then Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him. Then Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. So when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had joined the women around Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Now Martha, as soon as she had heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary was sitting in the house. Now Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? And she said to him, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. She said to him, and when she had said these things, she went her way and secretly called called Mary, her sister, saying, "The teacher has come and is calling for you." And as soon as she heard that, she arose quickly and came to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the town, but was in the place where Martha had met him. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and comforting her, when they saw that Mary rose up quickly and went out, followed her, and saying, "She is going to the tomb to weep there." Then when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. And he said, "Where have you put him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." And Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." And some of them said, "Couldn't not this man who opened the eyes of the blind also have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again groaning in himself, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone laying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, "Lord, by this time there is a stench, for he has been dead 4 days." And Jesus said to her, "Did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God?" Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was lying. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. And I know that you always hear me, but because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me." Now, when he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." And he who had died came out bound, hand and foot, with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Loose him and let him go." Then many of the Jews who had come to Mary and had seen the things Jesus did believed in him. But some of them went away to the Pharisees and told them the things that Jesus did. Amen. Phew. There's so much more to that story that goes into chapter 12. And even if you go back into chapter 10, because this is right after Jesus healed the blind man. And they were so upset that he healed him on the Sabbath that they tried to stone him and kill him. So there's what happened before and what happens after this, but this miracle that's here is just amazing to absorb. So what do you guys really capture when you hear this chapter or this portion of the chapter?
Well, I was just thinking about the end, right? When you said it's like, oh my God, these Pharisees, and they just saw somebody raised from the dead. Their hearts are so hard, and what's in their hearts?
Man. Yeah.
I was thinking about, okay, because you said it's mentioned a couple of times that Lazarus has been dead for several days, right? We know that Jesus raised up Jairus, his daughter, and we know that he raised up this other man's son, but that was like you just died immediately. And Jesus woke you up, so that you can have a little speculation if you want to say, was he really dead? But here is actual proof. He was there 4 days. He's already decaying. No if or no but, and still.
Yep. Get the hose, bring out the air fresheners. This is not going to be pretty, right? So, but you're right. Like, even with the centurion's son, or I think it was a centurion servant, Jesus didn't even go to that place because of the centurion's faith. He said, "Yep, it's done." So I love that you pointed out something very specific here. 4 days had gone by. There was no argument as to what happened to Lazarus. So, and to how he was resurrected. It wasn't, oh, he fell asleep, maybe he was unconscious, maybe he was in a coma. There's no denying that Lazarus was dead for 4 days. Yeah. So this is a group of siblings, right? 2 sisters and a brother who have a close relationship with Jesus. And they have the kind of relationship with God that moves him when they called, when they needed comforting. And that's what I want for all of us. Have that kind of relationship with the Lord, that when your heart is broken, when you're troubled, God responds.
The boldness to come before his throne.
Boldness. Right.
Because I thought we were gonna do a little of Martha and Mary sitting at the feet, it's Martha doing
Complaining.
the work. Yeah, Martha doing serving and Mary just sitting. And there was the boldness that she had to Jesus, saying, telling him, say something to her. She's doing nothing, the boldness to complain, and Jesus correcting her, but correcting her gently and saying, no, she chose the right thing,
Right.
to sit up, to listen to God's word, to listen to the word of God. So, but it was that relationship that she went boldly to him,
And she had that confidence in him.
that relationship.
Yeah, that familiarity. And the ironic thing is that people who don't know God still call on him when everything hits the fan, right? When they get that bad news on the phone, they don't even realize that they say Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
It's second nature, but it's something that they don't put to actual use. It's more of an exclamation than a tool. Call on Jesus. His name is not a curse word. It's the exact opposite of that. It's something that frees us from a curse. So when we call on the name of Jesus, there's power in that. And that's exactly what these two sisters did. This circumstance was used for the glory of God and for the glory of Jesus. And that's what he says. They made a point to say that Jesus loved each one of them. And so it might be confusing that when he received the notice of Lazarus' sickness, that he waited. That might be where people stop. When you receive the fact that somebody that you love is sick, so you sit there for 2 days and do nothing? People might be troubled at that and stop reading. What kind of God is this that knows I'm in trouble but waits? That's where we sit secretly. But there was something to note. There's no second messenger that came and said Lazarus died. Did you catch that?
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus knew it when it happened. He said Lazarus is dead. So he didn't need the first messenger for him to be aware of Lazarus's condition. The messengers are sent rightfully, by the way, out of faith of the two sisters. And so they're an example of what to do in times of trouble. Have faith and seek God. So Jesus told his disciples that he was glad that he wasn't there so that the disciples would have faith. Right? He tells us why he waited. We don't ever get that why. We don't even know sometimes when God is on the way and we wonder, where are you?
I thought it was for God to get the glory.
That's what it said.
Yeah, just
Both.
like Lucy had said before, because and not only that, because he's healed other people, but Lucy had he's healed other people. So if he would have healed them, that would have been he did it before.
We've seen that before. Right.
Yeah, but this is raising him from the dead 4 days after. So,
and that's such a beautiful point. We get complacent with our blessings because we've seen that before. We've seen our bills covered. We've seen somebody, get better. And the difference between that healing and that miracle, there's that theme that we've been talking about, right? So we're looking for something, for God to do something new in our lives.
And every day is a miracle. Every day we can get out of the bed. Every day we can walk.
Right. Every moment is a miracle that we can't recreate ever again. And we fail to miss the miracles that are present in our everyday life because we're looking for something new.
We just take for granted.
Take it for granted. Yep. So I think a good number of us wouldn't want to be in the position that that our circumstances cause people to have faith, right? Cause people to believe. Like we say it. We say, God, let my life be an example, a living sacrifice, right? And we don't really mean it. We want God to show up in our lives, but we don't want the dilemma that requires him. Well, unfortunately, because of sin, all of our lives require his intervention. So let's examine the words, the actions, and the hearts of Mary and Martha. They both had faith, wisdom, and knowledge to send for Jesus. At word that Jesus is on his way, Martha got up and went to him. Mary stayed home. In your pain, are you going to meet Jesus on the way? Or are you simply waiting for him to come to you? Martha's faith was so amazing, even in her grief. She just buried her brother 4 days ago. And as she ran to meet Jesus, she said, Lord, I know that you were capable when he was sick. And even now in this moment, you're still capable. She had that
God
kind
hears you.
Go ahead.
Because God hears you.
Yeah.
She believes, she says, she knows, I know that God hears you.
Yeah. She had that kind of faith that said, Lord, you can turn anything around. Wow. We have a tendency to have temporary faith. We have faith to the point where we think, well, if God's going to do something, it'll be here in this moment, right? Not after this, it'll be now. And that's sad because we limit God with that kind of thinking. Every woman of valor that we have studied showed the exact opposite. It was after the obvious and the natural time that the supernatural occurred, right? 90 years later, being given a child. That's after the obvious and the natural. So Martha came to Jesus with both her sorrow and her faith. It's okay to bring both to God. You can be brokenhearted and still have faith. So even when Jesus says to her that Lazarus will rise again, she responded with her faith and her knowledge of the resurrection that all believers will experience, right? And when which shows us that she knew that her brother had faith too. Because yes, I believe that if we believe in you in the resurrection, that he will rise again. So she knew that her brother believed. But Jesus tells her something important and asks her a question at the same time. We have here one of the few scriptures where Jesus tells us that he is the resurrection. And he tells this to a woman of faith. Now, he also revealed his identity to the woman at the well, but we've already been told that he had a relationship with this family. And the woman at the well didn't know that she was talking to Jesus until he revealed her identity. Martha already knew who he was. It had already been revealed to her. So not only do we have a better understanding of the resurrection that is to come through Jesus in the later times that Isaiah prophesied about, but we also get this intimate picture of what it's like to have a relationship with our Savior and for things not to go as we imagined or for him to answer us the way that we think that he would. What's that feel like? Lord, I know you, but my prayers, they don't seem to be answered. Because that's what we're talking about. Jesus, I sent for you, but my brother still died. I have a relationship with you, but it seems like you didn't care. You didn't show up sooner. What's that feel like? Her heart was broken, but she still had faith. And when Jesus asked if she believed in him, in her grief, her answer was still yes. While her brother was still in the tomb, she said yes. Before the miracle, she said yes. While the wound was still fresh, she said yes. The sickness is not God's abandonment. The delay is not God's abandonment. It doesn't mean that God doesn't see you or that he doesn't even know or that he's cruel. The Bible tells us why he waited. He waited so that it just wasn't one man that he was saving, but many. We miss that point. We see one resurrection, we forget how many came to faith. Many came to faith that day after witnessing the fullness of Lazarus' death. 4 days had passed. You cannot deny that he was dead and buried. In the previous chapter, Jews were ready to stone Jesus because they called him a blasphemer. And Jesus told them, examine my works, right? We're known by the fruit of our works. So here, Jesus did a mighty work in the presence of Jews, because remember, the Jews followed Mary from the house and were part of this. I don't think it was Mary and Martha that rolled away the stone, right? It was the Jews, the men that were with them. See, the sister already had faith in Jesus, but the Jews that were with them, there was a seed the size of a mustard that was planted that day and spread to many others for the harvest that was going to come. So let's go back to the scene. Jesus sends for Mary, right? He's talking with Martha, but he sends for Mary. He could have gone to the house, right? Why do you think that he didn't go to the house? Just curious.
Because of all the people that were there, and he needed some privacy, especially with everything that was going on. He was secluding himself from a lot of the people, because everybody had wanted to, like Thomas says, that they're out there to kill you, they're looking for you.
Let's go die together. That's what he said, right? Let's go die with him.
Mm-hmm.
What a curious statement. Yeah.
And what did it exactly what he knew that they were going to do? Some believed, like it says, but some went and told the Pharisees exactly what he knew that they were going to do, that they would be looking for him.
Yeah. The word will divide, and it divided that crowd. When I reviewed this, it was brought to me, like, not only could he have gone to the house, but sometimes you have to be pulled out of your atmosphere.
Yeah.
You have to start the shift, right? They always say shift the atmosphere. You have to start the shift by stepping out of your current surroundings to remind you of the sorrow that you're leaving behind. Sometimes you'll know it, like when someone is going through a really tough time mentally, right? Emotionally, the room reflects that. And when someone is in a great mental state, the room reflects that. It's either clean or it's not, right? And that's what I mean by that. Like, sometimes you really do need to be pulled out of that room. We talked earlier, a couple of weeks ago, when we were talking about Jesus healing in the upper room, the woman that was caring for many of the other widows, and he purposely shut people out. And in this instance, Mary was pulled out of that room because that room was a reminder of the missed opportunity for Lazarus to be healed. And the people that were wailing with her, they were all caught up in that grief. She was pulled out. So Martha goes back to get Mary, right? Y'all go grab someone else and remind them that Jesus is waiting for them, because that's what she did. Mary has a similar response in that at the word of Jesus waiting, she takes off so fast that others ran out thinking that she was going to go to the tomb. And she was, but she didn't know it at that time, right? So Martha ran when Jesus was on the way. Notice that difference. Martha ran when Jesus was on the way, and Mary ran when Jesus was waiting for her. I want to have that kind of faith that meets Jesus on the way. Some days I have the kind of faith that keeps God waiting for me to pick myself up out of my sorrows and to come to him. We miss the importance of that. Coming to Jesus. Mary brings her grief with her and literally lays it at the feet of Jesus. And you can almost see her words as accusatory, right? She says, we sent for you. If you had been here, my heart wouldn't be broken, right? If you had been here, my brother would not have died. You're muted, Mom.
How many times have we said that to God?
If only you had stopped this from happening. Why did you let this happen? We're told why. Well, first, Romans 8:28 talks about how God will use, he'll turn everything around for the good of those who are called according to a purpose, right? And those who love him. And it already said in the beginning of this that Jesus loved them and they loved him right back. This was for God's purpose. This was for God's glory. Again, it wasn't just the saving of one man or the healing of one man. How many families by the people who witnessed, not just them, not just the witnesses, but the families, the generations that came after, the ripple effect of faith. Her broken heart moved Jesus. It said that Jesus groaned and his spirit was troubled. And I pray that we all have that kind of relationship with Christ, that his spirit is troubled when our hearts are broken. That his name is just not a familiarity on our lips when an emergency happens, but somebody that we go to regularly. When they go to the grave, Martha either still doesn't get it, or she's stuck on thinking that it's too late for a miracle, because when Jesus asked them to take away the stone, what did she say?
And now he stinks.
It's been 4 days, too late. What are you talking about, right? Let me remind you, he'll stink by now. Why do we remind God of our knowledge of the natural and how the bad situation has gotten so bad that it's too late to do anything, too late to fix it? You missed your opportunity, God. Who are we to say that? You missed your opportunity to fix it.
This problem's too big for you, God.
Too big for you. What's the
because
point?
it doesn't look like what we think it should look like.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like what we imagine it to be, and we put him in our perfect box. And our box is, our little box in this world is not perfect, but we try to box him in that instead of, stepping into his will, and so that he will give us understanding of his will and his ways.
Mm-hmm.
If we just go to him, they went to him and he showed them, who he was. They knew who he was, but they didn't understand his power.
They said who he was. I know you are the Son of God, the Christ, the one who the resurrection is coming through. I know that you're going to bring the resurrection. I know that if you ask God, even in this moment, he'll give you whatever you want. So why did they still limit him? Why do they still limit him?
Because for me, it's like there's so many things that you've touched on. This is like, okay, God, thank you. I thank you for this word, because when you mention his love for them, it's just like, so that's the love he has for me, that he cares so much when I'm hurting, when I'm distressed, whatever the situation, your mom, I can even relate my anxiety and my anxiety attacks. He cares. If I just go to him, and the image that I got, I saw them weeping, but I shared with you all that I lost my dog, and literally in the office, when he took his final breath, I buckled and I cried out, oh God, my God, my God, help me. Because I didn't know, there was no one else who could comfort me. Keith could not comfort me. No one could comfort me. And so I had to cry out, Father, and I just wailed, literally, and so yes, I'm still grieving, but at that moment, I had to say that to get that out, to get enough composure to, like you said, take yourself out of that situation to move to the next, so I could finish what I needed to do, to move beyond that room where death was. Now let's move on to the next phase. So that all is like hitting. Also, when you're talking about just in her grief, how she was able, she didn't wait for Jesus. She met him on the way. And so you asked the question, are you gonna meet him on the way or while he's waiting on you? I had a heaviness because tomorrow will be 1 year that my cousin died unexpectedly, who was like a brother that I grew up with. And so as I'm speaking to his sister, who's the younger one, he was the older me than her, she said, depressed. So I was trying to encourage her. And I had some heaviness, but I said, Lord, like you said, get yourself out of it. I had to still do that pep talk. I don't want to have this heaviness. I don't want to, you have to grieve, but it's not to the point where I'm going to live in it. I'm not going to babysit it at this point, so, wow, word is right on time. When you keep talking about what she knew God can do the miracle, why were they still saying after they professed it? I think like if it's me, because you're seeing the situation, so you're still kind of seeing like, but he is dead. But I know you said you can resurrect him, but he is dead. So it's like, I look at that battle again, like I'm battling what I see, but I got faith that you can do this, but I'm battling what I see. Yes. And so there was a quote that said, and I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember it. And the lady had a blindfold. You can't see what God's doing. She goes, I repeat, and she put on a blindfold. You cannot see what God is doing. He is doing something, but you cannot see it. So, he was already going to do it. The verse that comes to mind is Ephesians 3:20. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. The fact of imagine. So he was able to do more than they could even imagine. Not at the resurrection at that time, according to his power that is at work within us. So that just, all of that for me is just the whole, look, that is the sermon. That's the sermon.
And it's a great word too, because what we realize in this of Mary having to be called out of that household is because the miracle wasn't in that room. It was at the tomb. Everyone else that he pushed out of the room, that's because the miracle was in the room and he needed faith to enter into that room, right? That's where the person that was being resurrected laid. But in that house, there was only her grief, only her sorrow. The miracle was not present there. So it is something that we have to consciously remind ourselves above everything that we can even imagine. She said it, but she didn't comprehend what she was professing. And he had to remind her, he said, well, just like I told you that he will raise again. And I mean now, not just in the resurrection, not just in the final days, today. Would you really have tried to stop Jesus and point and say, never mind? It's been too long. You should have fixed it yesterday, 3 days ago. I quit. And this is why, when we first started talking, I think even during our testimony, we talked about, at what point do you give up on faith? At what point do you think that God is past the point of fixing it? We do that. We shut the door on what God can do in our lives because we can't see it. It was their faith that brought Jesus to the tomb. And when I read this scripture, I had all these flashes, right? The approach to the tomb of Lazarus, and not many days later, the approach to the tomb of Jesus. They rolled away the stone for Lazarus. And after Jesus was resurrected, they found the stone rolled away too. So I see this imagery of them going to these two different tombs and these two different stones. And both were resurrected. One resurrected himself. And that makes the difference between, oh, what's the difference between, this person was resurrected and they said this person will do that. Well, he was the only one that was capable of resurrecting himself. He was the only one that lived a perfect life, that performed the actual miracles on others. Because you can say, oh, well, the disciples performed the miracles. And he said that we can do greater works in his name, keywords in his name, right? We cannot resurrect ourselves. We do not live a perfect life. He does. I don't want to say did because he's still the living God. I serve the living God. He is perfection. We are but a dim reflection in a mirror, right? These two women of valor. In this story, we see Jesus not only groaning at the death of his loved one, we see the reason why he traded places with us. Jesus' heart was broken for us too. Broken with us. And these women of valor, they give a very real response from women of faith in a time of hardship and grief. One runs, one waits. One meets God halfway, the other leaves God waiting and able to do a mighty work in us. He's just waiting for us to step up out of our, dust ourselves off and bring it to his feet. She laid her sorrows at his feet. And that's what the scripture tells us to do. Bring it to me. All you who are weary and heavy laden, bring it to me. I'll give you rest. They are examples to go and seek Jesus. No matter what, even in our grief, and to not lose faith. If we go into chapter 12, which I'm not going to have you guys read today, read on your own if you want. Like I've been listening to the book of John and the book of Romans for the last few days, like in its entirety, and they've both been really eye-opening. Like when you study something, things are just revealed a little bit more and a little bit more. And I'll say it this way: when you become a chef, you notice the taste of things different. You recognize the seasonings that are in the pot, when before you were just happy for the meal. And the difference between studying the word personally and listening to someone else give a sermon is that personal recognition of those seasonings. But if we go into chapter 12, we see that Jesus is being honored at a banquet where Martha is serving, and Mary comes in and anoints Jesus with the costly oil and her tears. These two women entered into praise and thanksgiving, and they each brought what they could. Martha brought her talents, Mary brought her gifts. These two women of valor didn't just take their blessing and go. And here's a good reminder: some of us receive the blessing and then forget. We have a tendency to remember all of our pain and remember none of our blessings. We start each week with saying, hey, what's your testimony for the week? And we have to really sit there and if we didn't write it down, some of us, we have to really sit there and think, what's a good testimony to share? But if I asked you, were you bothered this week? Did something get under your skin? You got a story like that. I'm sure of it. Why? Why do we remember our pain instead of our blessings?
And we take it for granted.
We take it for granted. If you follow this story of Mary and Martha, you see that they didn't just leave with their blessing and go.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a good reminder that sometimes the circumstances that we're going through is because we are called to be that living example of faith, so that others can learn what faith is too. My husband often talks about how at times when he goes back to Ohio, he'll run into people that remind him, hey, I knew your mom. And she was always praying. She was always, a woman of faith, and she was going through a lot. 40 years later, people still come to him on the street and remind him of how his mother's faith through the battle that she was going through impacted their lives. When we go through hardships, grief, loss, sickness, battles, attacks, I want you to picture the blessing that's waiting for you on the other side. And not just for you, for every witness that's out there in this generation and the one coming behind it. Because the story will be told. Let you slip and fall outside. Somebody's going to tell that story. Oh, I saw this person fall, slip, and this is how it looked. They pulled out a full scorpion, right? Somebody will tell the whole story of how you got flipped upside down.
Like you did?
Yep. Alicia, I'll tell it right now. You had the slowest fall in history. It was like a 75-minute fall.
As soon as you said fall, it always puts me in the mind of that.
Oh my God, I had forgotten that till you said it, but it's true. Like, do we recall our blessings the same way? And will we let somebody else give the testimony that we're living? Trevor, you told us a testimony earlier about how your interaction with the dentist and how you wanted to run through the entire office praising God, which was uncharacteristic of how you would have been months ago. And now the whole office can share, wow, this woman's faith really changed her. And you were that example for every one of their families who heard about it. That's what I want people to get from our lives. Yep, they went through some things, but they didn't lose their faith. We talked earlier again during testimony about my great-grandmother who lived an entire life of prayer. To the very last breath, she was known for her faith. That doesn't mean that her life was perfect, but she met perfection on the other side.
We keep on forgetting that Jesus said and forewarned us that in this world we will have trials and persecution. But we're not by ourselves. We're with him. You have good cheer. I'm with you to the end.
Right. My mom didn't know it earlier, but she sent me a message. Pray over your bones. And in that moment, she didn't know that my entire spine was hurting to the point where I could barely roll over. And I laid hands on my back and I prayed over myself. Her words were a reminder that we need it. Call on him. Don't just sit there and take the punch. Don't just sit there and feel the pain. If the pain's going to be there, let the praise be there too. That's what Mary and Martha did. They were still in their pain, but they still praised God. They still sought Jesus, and they sought the comfort of the Lord. These women of valor remind us Jesus knew our troubles way before we even brought them to him, but he's waiting to see if we'll bring it. I mean, he knows whether we're going to bring it or not, but we still have to take that step of faith.
We have to be aware of what's in us.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, I just don't know what's in me. Like sometimes you say, oh, I'll never do that. Little do you know how quickly you fall.
Yeah.
So.
Great point.
That's like Peter.
Yeah. I'll never. And then, okay.
Never deny you.
Yeah. 3 times later. This beautiful.
And Martha,
Mhm.
she said the same words. You are the Christ. You know, she said
Like Peter did right before Jesus says to him, get behind me, Satan.
Right before he was betrayed. What would your response be if you thought all was said and done and it was too late for your miracle? Would you be Mary, Martha, or the crowd? The crowd that said, well, I know he just opened the eyes of the blind man, so I don't understand why he couldn't prevent this from happening.
I don't know until it happens. We can always speculate, but we really don't know.
I think that at times we are each of them. We're either Martha that comes running, meets him on the way. We're either Mary that keeps him waiting, or we're the crowd that gets dragged by the faith of others.
And I believe also, like, when you get hit with some bad news, you get knocked down for that moment, but your faith and who you trust in and who you believe in gets you back up and say, no, I'm going to fight.
Mm-hmm. The blow might be unexpected, but the response is all you. How will you respond? And as we talked about last week, if you put on the full armor of God, you're at least ready for the battle that's coming your way anyway. Yeah. Great study tonight. Probably one of my favorites. It's a true reminder that sometimes there's more to be saved than just us. Those witnesses that gave the account had faith because of this, had a relationship with Christ after this. Yes, some of the Pharisees went and they told for different reasons, but those that came to Christ, those that came to salvation, that's the bigger picture that we often miss because we're so focused on our own pain. I pray that every one of our days is a testimony of who God is, who God was, and who God will be. Any other thoughts on these two?
Just reflecting on it all. Because I probably would be like Martha if you were here.
But make no mistake, there's no, like, yes, Martha ran and met him, and yes, Mary had him waiting. The point is they still came. Whether you keep him waiting or you show up halfway, know which direction to go in, know who to seek.
Matter of fact, I was just reflecting a while back, listening, because I have said, Lord, you could have stopped all this. And I'm talking about someone that I loved, still love, and passed away so early at age 21. I was like, you could have stopped this. You could have changed his life.
Mm-hmm.
This didn't have to happen. And I was so angry, and I was so angry with God for many years until God finally, the light came on. He had free will. I can't. I won't.
Not that he can't, but he won't. He gives us a choice.
Well, he gives us free will. So now the ball's on our side, on our court. Like he won't.
When you think about the Pharaoh in Egypt, right? And how God hardened his heart. You think, well, free will was taken out there, right? And that's such a long debate. And when you go into Romans, it talks about God having compassion on whom he chooses to have compassion. God intervening on whom he decides. And when you read the story of Job, and at the end, when God says, you don't know all the things that I'm working on, that I've been doing. And as you said, I think Trevor said, like, you're blind to everything that's going on behind these scenes. You've no idea, bless you, Camille. You've no idea what I'm taking care of. And we talk about the ripple effects. So yes, God gives us a choice. And sometimes that choice, really all the time, defines what happens next. We can choose to accept God, and that defines what happens next. Or we can choose to reject him, and that really defines what happens next.
Eternity.
Eternity. So Lazarus wasn't the only one that received life that day. And I pray that when we are in those storms, we recognize someone else might need the testimony too. Bigger picture. God, use even this circumstance, that you get the glory, that you get the victory, that your name is praised because of this. And that's something that we need to say. Even when we don't understand, even when it stinks, when it's 4 days past your due date.